Okay, this is a video, it's probably about 25 minutes long, hopefully, and all this is really going to do is cover the things we've done in class in relation to rendering products and creating some surface finishes. This should help you quite a lot with scanning your sketches into Photoshop and making them look a little bit more realistic. And the example we're going to use is a kettle, and we're not going to go to a huge amount of detail on it, but what I'm going to do is cover the basic steps that we used in class. So obviously I would expect to sort of see this sort of finish with your sketches in a few weeks. You've got plenty of time to get it right and ask me questions if you're not too sure. And what we're going to look at here is this kettle. Now I've got a basic sketch here of a kettle which I downloaded from the net. I'm going to use this as a starting point here. It's nice, it's got good line work, it's nice and strong, it's nice and clear. I've taken all these lines out of it, of course. So we're going to use that. And what I've also done is I've downloaded some other images in relation to a little bit of inspiration. So if I have a look at the coffee here, I can see there's some nice tonal colours. You can bring these into Photoshop and sample all of these colours as like a colour palette. When you're rendering, it helps you. The same goes for things like this. If you wanted to have something that had a brass component on the work, you could sample a brass handle and take in the colours. So getting images from the internet is very helpful to nudging you in the right direction when you're doing rendering. So the first thing you're probably going to do is you're going to right click on your sketch and you're going to open that with Photoshop like this, and what you'll have a look at, the image should be hopefully 300 dots per inch. You can check that by going to image size, and it will be if you scan it in. And what you're going to do is go to File, New, and you're going to create a new page, and you're going to use A3 because that's the size that you print out at. You're going to rotate that, and then what you'll probably do is you'll just drag your sketch into this page here like this, and this will be the one you work on. Now at the minute, this can be the outline layer. We've talked about this being the outline line. The background layer is the layer behind. You don't need that so much. This one doesn't have an outline or background layer in the sense like this one would do, because this is a flat image. Now if you wanted this to be the outline layer, you'd have to double click to unlock that, and then you'd create your other layers underneath of it that you would then work on, and this would be the outline layer. You could rename that outline if you want, but I would advise you really to bring your sketch in and then drop that into a separate page, which will be your board. So once you've done that, you can delete this, and let's have a look on here. Yeah, so that's this one here. Now in terms of the line work, what you want to do is you want to change the size of it. You can do that by going to Show Transformation Tools here, or Control T. If you go to the shortcuts here, you can see, which one is it? Let's have a look. Edit, Free Transform, Control T. So all the shortcuts are next to all the icons here for moving things around. So you can make that a little bit smaller so it fits on the page. Hold down Shift will constrain the proportions. If you don't, it will do this. You hold down Shift to keep it the same. Get to sort of size that you want, which is about here. I can zoom in here and have a look. Now if you zoom in closely, what you see is a couple of things that aren't quite right with the sketch that you might find when you bring your sketches in. The first thing is there's a bit of a white fluff around the edge of the sketch. It might be where you want to cut things out or where you scan and the sketch isn't dark enough. You can fix that by going Command and L, which will bring up your levels, or go into Image Adjustments and Levels. Here's the shortcut. And the black here will darken the black and the white will increase the white. So if you have a look on here, there's like a fluffy edge around this edge. If we increase the white, that goes away, right, which is great. And if we darken down the blacks, it makes them solid. Normally this spike is where Photoshop is picking up data. At the minute it's telling us there's no black in this image because the sketch is actually grey. So it's kind of saying that black would be here, which is close towards the greys, if you see what I mean. It says there's a lot of white in this image because you see the spike here. That's because the sketch is mostly white, right? So if we pull this down, we can darken it down, and then if we zoom out a little bit, have a look. That's kind of tidied up our sketch. That's brilliant. Now the thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the top layer is called outline, right? Because that's going to be an outline layer, and you want to set that to multiply. Remember this. Now the reason we set it to multiply is that when we draw underneath, let's say we draw with a black pen, at the minute we can see it, right? Actually that's a bad example. Let's make it like a red. As we draw underneath, you can actually fill in the sketch and draw in the sketch. If this top layer was set to normal, it will just treat it as a white page. And you don't want that. You want to be able to see underneath it, so you set it to multiply, right? Pretty straightforward. All the other layers here have to be set to normal, because if you set them to multiply, it messes things up. So your top one is your outline layer. The top one should be set to multiply, like this, so you can see underneath it, and then you lock it with a padlock. What that means is I now can't draw on that layer. I can draw on the other layers, obviously, because they're not locked and they're set to normal. And what you will do if we erase this here, if you press the caps lock button, you can toggle between the circle and the pointer, and the parentheses buttons, which are next to the enter key, will make your brushes bigger or smaller. So I'm just going to delete all that layer like that. Now brush settings, just quickly, size is there, hardness is there, opacity and flow. If I turn down the hardness, it makes a soft brush. If I turn up the hardness, it makes a hard brush, right? Pretty straightforward. If you turn down the flow, and that turns down the amount of ink that comes out, it's quite soft if you see. If you turn down opacity, opacity will change the intensity of the colour, okay, like that. Now for deleting, you can do Command and Z. If you hold down Command, Alt and Z, you can go back quite a few steps. Put that back in there. Now it's been difficult again. There we go. Right, so yeah, if we turn down, that's opacity, and if you increase your flow, you get a harder. See, softer and harder. Right, so basically for colouring things in anyway, they both want to be set to 100. You want to make sure your spacing is at 1%. It's not at 25 or something, because it'll give you like a dotted line. You want to have that set to 1%. And then all you'll do is you'll fill in certain parts of this. So the minute, for example, I'm going to fill in this spout. Right, you can make the brush smaller. If you hold down Shift, that can make you jump about. You can jump straight lines. By holding down Shift, you can do a straight line like this between 2 points. Right, that's quite handy when you're drawing straight lines like this. And then once that's done, once you've filled that in, what you then do is you lock the transparency. Now if you lock the transparency, it just means if I now change the colour, I can draw in it, but I can't draw out of it. That's because it's created that as a separate layer altogether. This is just one locked layer. I can't draw in or out of that. Oh, sorry, I can't draw outside of it. I can only draw inside of it, right? That's very handy. If you try to delete it, you have to unlock it. Otherwise, what happens if you try to delete it like this, it just cuts a piece out. Oh, that doesn't work. You actually have to unlock it to delete it properly, right? Okay, so we turn all that back on. So that's how your drawings should be set up. You should have an outline layer on the top, which is set to multiply and is locked with a padlock, so you can't work on it. And all your other layers, which you're going to colour in, should just be set to normal, and then you lock the transparency when you've finished. Right, so if we close this down, and we don't save that because we don't need it, we go back to this. This is one I was working on earlier, like this. We'll set this one up instead. Right, so here you can see how I've gone through the model, and I've got lots and lots of layers like this, and they're all kind of locked. They're all locked in terms of transparency. The top one's locked to multiply, and I can't work on it. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at how basic reflections work. So if you have down auto select selected, you can choose any part of this, which I've done. Right, so I'm going to do the main case right first, and I'm going to choose a colour. So I'm going to have like a, I don't know, let's have a dark blue maybe, if that would work. Maybe like a dark blue or something. Yeah, okay, we'll do dark blue. So I select that, and if I have my brush selected and I make the brush bigger, because I have that layer locked to transparency, I can literally just fill that in like this, right? Pretty easy to do. Then I can press V for pointer, touch this one, it selects that one automatically. Go back, press B for brush, I can fill that in. Go back to V again, touch the top one, B for brush, and do that. Now, you can apply gradients to these, just solid gradients to give like a textured finish, or if you want a reflective finish, then you have to cut the reflections. I'll show you a little bit to make it look like shiny plastic. The best way to do this anyway is to make sure you always select new layers when you're doing, select new layers when you're putting on your highlights. And that'll make your life a little bit easier for manipulating the highlights, because once you change a layer, you kind of change it for good. So if we're working on the case main front, which is this piece here, if I hold down Command and hover over the top of this, and press that, it will select that layer that I blocked in colour. Right? It just selects that layer. If I do new layer and call this case highlight, like this, right? I can now put a gradient on this which doesn't affect the main colour underneath, right? It's just affecting the top layer that I've created above this after I selected it. So hold down the gradient, choose white, here's your gradient options here. This one is white transparent, that's the one you want. And I want to cast a light reflection across this. Light normally comes from the top left. So the intensity of the gradient begins where you begin to drag. So here, right where that cross is where the highlight begins, and then it tapers out as further I drag away. So if I go like this here, you get like a very strong highlight. If I do like that, you get a softer highlight. So all I'm really going to do now is just paint on light basically, and it takes a little while to find the right spot. That's quite good. I'll do a little bit from the right hand side because there's going to be light coming from both directions. Now because I'm painting this on above the layer of colour, I can always delete this, which is great, so it doesn't really matter if you make a mistake. That's fine, I'm happy with that. Go back to V and I'll touch this ellipse, this one up here, hold down Command, select that layer, and if I hold down spacebar as well, you can move the page around. New layer, and I'm going to do lid highlight. Okay, and I'll do the same thing with the gradient. Put the gradient on here. You've kind of got to get to the same point as the other one, and a bit from the right. Okay, that's good. And we'll do the top lid top. Select that again. That's that top piece, and we'll do lid highlight. You can see here how Photoshop builds up with loads of layers quite quickly. That's why it's good to name them. It's very difficult otherwise. If I put on a gradient from the right here and a little bit from the top left, so there's a little bit of light coming in like that. Great. Now if I zoom out, make sure that you save all of this, by the way, because if you don't save this, Photoshop will crash. It's always good to save things. Just double check that this is still working fine. Yep, that's all good. Right then, now Command and D will deselect. We can go select and deselect there. We'll get rid of the selection bit. And what you're going to do is we're going to make this into reflection. Now at the minute that's kind of looking like a sort of soft plastic without a reflective surface. But if we want to make it look a hard reflective surface, we need to delete some of the reflection. So if I hold down caps lock, you can bring that back. I can use the parentheses to change the size. And you'll see what I mean here. If we come back to the reflection here, case highlight, that's this one. Right, now if I delete a little bit of it like this, like that, it's got to be nice and smooth. It's actually a bit tricky. Yeah, it's not too bad. Right, what you're basically creating here is you're creating the highlight that would come from the horizon. So if you turn your head to the left, you tip your head across the left, what you've actually got is here, you've got like the horizon distance, and then this is the light of the sky, and that's what you're creating. You're just creating this ground line here as far as the eye can see, and this is the highlight of the sky, really. That's all it is. Then we'll go to the top lid highlight here. We'll do the same. We'll just delete that down there. Go back a little bit. Step back. Lid highlight. That's this one. Right, okay, that's good. What I might do is put a little bit on the left of this as well, just to make a bit more, just maybe there's something in the background that's catching that, like that. And we'll do a little bit on this side too, like that. Brilliant. The top lid highlight, we can just cut a little bit across the bottom, like that. And what we'll then do is you want to creep the reflections around this a little bit. So you go to the case light highlight down here, and we can zoom in a little bit to this part. What you tend to find is light will creep around things, so you can use the smudge tool, and you can change the settings and strength of that here, and we can just actually make that a little bit a harder brush. And we'll just creep that light around there, like that. It might even creep up here a little bit. Right. And we'll just push that around this edge. It just makes it a little bit more convincing because light will always chase the edges of things, right? So I'm just going to grab some of that light and just literally bend that around the corner. Same for the lid highlight here. Right, same for this one, and same on the top, and same on this one here. And it's all these little details that actually make things look quite convincing, right? So Yeah, alright, that'll do. We'll maybe put a little bit more on this one. Just bring that up there a bit more. Right. So we'll zoom out of that and have a look at that. How's that looking? It's not too bad. I don't quite like this bit here. I think we need to cut a bit more out of that top piece to make it a bit more reflective. And we'll just smudge tool around a bit more of that light around the edge here, like that. And we'll chase that edge around here because light will catch that. Catch that there. Great, right, that'll do. Now, in terms of adding a bit more tonal value to this, what we can do is go back to the main case, which is this piece here. We can reselect it again, like that, and I can create another layer, which is below the highlight, and I can add in a gradient, but this time I can put a black gradient in. I can take the opacity down of this a little bit, and I can drop in a dark gradient from the bottom. Just a little one like that, just to kind of make it look like it's a bit of shadow sort of going on. Yeah, because light will chase it in different ways. Right, okay, so that'll do. Great. Now that's that. You can keep on building this up, by the way. I could put another highlight on here. If I wanted to, I could get the selection tool and I can create a new layer. And if I wanted to, I could just basically create another reflection. You can sort of just draw them in if you want. Let's say I draw a reflection on here like this, right? And I go back to the gradient tool. It's white, and I drag that there. Turn the opacity back up. Like that. Deselect it. And I can just knock that down a little bit, blend it in. You can keep on building reflections in like that using these tools, and then you can erase it a little bit if you wanted to. You could soften the eraser brush and just basically just take that out a little bit on one side to give it a reflection. You can move that around. Where did it go? This one. Turn off auto select. You can maybe put that somewhere else. We can lift that to the top. Like that, and we can stretch it down a bit so it chases the whole thing. Just turn it slightly to the side, do that, and we can increase the opacity of it a little bit so it's a bit brighter. Yeah, something like this. So that's grand, that's good. And what we'll do now is save the work. Good, and we'll come on to the base. Now if we were to have a black base here, we would click on the base, auto select it. This is the base front. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I want to change the colour of that to something very, very dark. So I'm going to have a black. Because I've got the opacity selected, I can just fill that in. Hang on a second. Why is it not working? Base front, brush, like that. Fill that in, like this. Now exactly the same thing again. I'm going to hold down Command, select this area, new layer. I'm going to call this base highlight. Like that, and I'm just going to get a gradient and put a gradient on from the right. So light is going to hit this from the right to the left. Sorry, I'm going to flip that over. So it's white gradient that's going on. So light's going to hit it from there. Actually, let's do. You can always delete these. So these gradients can always be deleted later, right? So okay, it's not too bad. Something like that. Okay, so it looks very heavy at the minute. And in theory, yeah, you could leave it like that, and you could actually have that as your surface finish. But it looks a little bit simple, a bit basic. So the same thing we're going to do as before is we're just going to delete it. Make sure it's a hard brush that you're using when you're deleting, and press your spacebar, caps lock, sorry, to bring this back. And all we're going to do is paint in the reflections. So if I remember correctly, and the one I did yesterday will look quite nice actually. Let's have a look. Let's have a quick look at that. Yeah, I'm going to cut that down there. So, if we close this down, right. So I'm going to have a cut in this around here to cut this reflection like that. And you basically, when you're cutting your reflections, you want to cut it in a way which chases the shape of the object which you're rendering, right? Bit on the right hand side there. There's going to be a bit of a reflection there on this side, which is coming from this back piece, and we'll make the brush a bit smaller. How smooth these lines are makes a big difference to the actual finish of the work, like this. And suddenly it starts to take shape. It actually starts to look quite nice quite quickly. It really is just about tricking the eye, because this is how it would actually look in real life, because in theory you'd have this kind of nice sort of like gradient of light, which would be interrupted by whatever sort of casts a shadow really on a plastic finish. The way you look at it is just look at other products, look at other photographs of products, and you'll see it's kind of the same thing. So it's just about basically creating gradients and then cutting them like that. Sort of round off the edges at the tops, because that's important, because nothing is completely like a sharp angle. Most products are quite smooth in the transition. And we'll just try and round this one off a bit more because it's quite round. Right. And this one needs rounding a little bit on the bottom as well, like that. This needs rounding here. Simple, very, very little detail things, so they make a big difference. Right, so I'll say for now, that'll probably do for now on this one. Probably just cut that a bit more. Yeah, that's about right. Right, good stuff. Now, the next thing is the buttons. So we're going to make a new layer here. And what we want to do is I want to make a button here that goes in. So I'm going to get the circle tool, and if you hold down spacebar you can move that around. If you hold down the shift button it keeps it a perfect circle. So if I hold down shift, keeps it a perfect circle, and then press spacebar, I can move that around. And I want the indentation for the button to be something like that. Right? Brilliant. Now, if I was to cut or paint within that, it will give me a very, very hard line within that dotted line. But I want to soften that line out a little bit. So the way we do that is going to feather. Now, feather basically just softens the edges like a bit of sandpaper would on the edge of a piece of plastic. It softens it down. You can play around with the radiuses of the pixels, but I always choose about 3, right? And I'm going to have black on here because obviously it's shiny plastic, so anything with a dint going in is going to have a reflection on this side. So I'm going to go to brushes, and because it's I've done like a softness on the edge, first of all I'm just going to do a dot like that. You can kind of see it there, it's kind of softened it right on the corner. Now to put the highlight back in for the reflection of the light coming from the top right in this case, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to expand the pixels to make that dotted line get bigger. Look, it'll jump like that. And then I'm going to go back to my gradients like this, and I'm going to go new layer again for the gradient so I can delete it, and I'm going to put the gradient in from this side coming up, so it puts light in there. It's probably a bit much. Something like that will be fine. And now what I can do is I can get the eraser tool and delete, bring back that black. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it back where it actually cuts on the image here. So I'm going to bring that in and round, delete this bit here, and shape that button out like that. So we shape that over. Like that. No, I don't like that actually. Start that again. That's good. That'll do. Like that. Now, if we come out of that, it looks rough when you're close up. When you zoom out a little bit, it actually looks quite nice. Maybe we'll just do a big brush like this. Look, and we'll just do it like this. That's an easier way. Yeah, like that. That'll do. Right, so now we've got a nice sort of reflective button in there. We'll do the same for this side, so we'll get another ellipse tool. Now on this occasion it's going to be hard to get that ellipse to be the right size, so we go to select and you go to transform selection, and we can just turn that around, and as you've used these isometric templates before, you'll know that you can, if you squash an ellipse to the side, you can actually make it look like it's in perspective, but you'll know that anyway from doing stuff with me before. Make that a bit smaller. Right, so this is going to be the one on the right hand side, and we're going to do that there. New layer. If you accept that first, apply it. New layer, and we're going to make it black like we did before. First of all though, we're going to feather it with 3 pixels to soften it. We'll blacken it down. We'll go select, modify, expand. We'll expand it by 3 pixels. New layer, and this is going to be the highlight gradient. Highlight's going to come from the same side, like this. Like that. Brilliant. And then we're just going to delete, again, the bit we don't want. Like that, and then deselect it, and there's another button. It's kind of alright. It's not the best actually, so we might have to put a gradient back into the back onto this. So we'll go to base, front, base highlight, base front. And we'll select that, and we'll put a slight gradient back onto this side, just to pop that out a little bit. Yeah, like that. Great. So this is quite rough and quite quick, by the way. I'm doing this very, very fast. I would, like last night, I spent a lot longer on these last night than I have on tonight. So I'll just do this again, transform selection, try and chase this shape. If I wanted to make this look like it was coming out, I would do it in reverse. So first of all, I'll put that like this, accept that selection, select, modify, feather. I'd probably feather it more if I wanted to make it look like it was popping the other way. I'd probably put like 8 pixels like this, and we'll put on the white first, like that, maybe a bit more, and we'll just take that away. Right, so that maybe makes it look like it's kind of coming around like a bit of a bump in the opposite direction. The actual buttons themselves, center buttons, these ones, let's have a look, front buttons, these ones. We'll do the front buttons, we'll make them a darker colour, make them a darker grey, and we'll just colour them all in. Now if you wanted just to give them like a metal effect very quickly, you could just do a gradient like we've done before. Yeah, let's do it the other way. Yep, like that, and then you can get your dodge and burn tool, and you can basically darken bits of them down and give them a bit of a metal finish. And you can get your dodge tool, the highlights, and we can kind of put some highlights in there. Actually put it onto shadows. Actually, we might come back to those in a bit. Actually, well, that's not the important part of this, really. So, quite basically, it's sort of starting to take shape now. We've got this piece here, which is the base top, and we can do exactly the same thing. And it's just basically repeating this over and over again, right? Same thing, highlights, selecting this here, creating a piece, dropping in a gradient, like that, here, and then cutting the gradient where the reflection is, like that. Deselect it, there's reflection done on there. And this top piece here, same thing again, choose a colour. I'm going to have a dark colour for the handle, and we're going to just colour that in like this. I'm going to select it like that, new layer, put a gradient to show the light. Light might come from this direction. Say from there, I'm going to do it from here a little bit. Like that, and then I can darken down certain parts of it. I can hold down Alt, select a colour, I can choose a darker colour, and I can paint in where the shadow would be on this side here, and this would have a little bit of a shadow there. And then obviously you can work away at that. You can kind of put a bit more, you can put a reflection on there if you wanted to, or let's have a look. You could actually make this a reflective surface by cutting a bit of that away. Yeah. And then you could chase that light around the edge. Yeah. And then we can go back to the handle and we can put a gradient on it again, but in reverse, to darken it down the other way. Like that. I don't really like that handle actually, in all honesty. I don't think that looks particularly good. Let's have a look. Yeah, maybe we'll just leave it like that for now. Now, the last couple of bits I wanted to say to you was bringing in things for inspiration. So if we take something like this door handle and we open it with Photoshop and we grab this and drag this into here, what we can do is we can steal this inspiration a little bit for rendering things up. So if we wanted to make this the same sort of effect, we can use this handle as a bit of a guide. Now what you might do is you would choose this front spout area, and then we get your brush and you would select a colour. So we'll start off with a fairly light colour, right, and we'll fill the whole thing in like this, like that, and then we'll do the spout side and we'll choose a slightly darker colour for the spout side, like that, and then come back to this, and then you want to get your brushes and you want to make them fairly soft brush. You want to bring your flow down and your opacity down, which will mean you can build up as a gradient, and then you want to go ahead and just select certain different parts of the colour and just start to build that in. Now this will probably take a while to do. It's not something that you do in 2 minutes. It takes a little bit of time just to kind of get it right. I'm just going to try and do this very, very quickly because I'm running out. I don't want this video to go on too long. And because you've got your opacity turned down low, you can kind of build this up bit by bit. Right, so you can come back in here and select a lighter colour again, something really nice and bright, or even a white. You can select a white and bring a white in there. Yeah, something like that. And then obviously that will be lighter in there. And then you can just use the colours that you've got inside and just keep working away with those ones now. Now that you've selected them, you can just keep working away on the colours that are already in here. And just keep working away. So that's how you would build up. Colours within this. And the more you work at it, the better that'll get. If we come to the spout side and we'll select a colour there, you can sort of chase some of these colours down. You can chase a few of the colours over, we can copy them over. The bright one. Like that. Right, so it's not the best because I'm doing it really quickly and it's probably a little bit overdone, but you know, that's how you do it. And then you would do the same for this piece down the bottom here. You would kind of do the same down there. So you would basically take a colour, you would take a brush, take a solid colour, fill it in, make sure your brushes are hard again. So it's 100% of colour, like that. And then you would just begin to build up the colours, stealing them from somewhere else. So I might take a black here. And then a lighter colour there, and build that back into it. Yeah, so you can quite quickly make that kind of look like a brass or a copper. The cup, you may just choose maybe like a red colour like this. Fill it, make sure the colours are solid, like that. Then, like we've done before, select the cup, make a new layer, right, chuck in a gradient from one side, one that covers the whole cup, there we go, and then just basically go back to your razor tool and maybe, I don't know, give it a reflection down the side of the cup like this, one down there, and then probably delete this bit in the middle because you'll darken that down. You get the idea, you know. You can work on this in your own time, and you can build this up, you know. You can burn that down a little bit, make the cup darker on one side, maybe dark on the inside in there, you know. So yeah, just work away at it. I'm just doing this really quick because I'm running out of time. So that's that. Yeah, so if you were going to try and create this as a steel kettle, for example, and you want this to be metal, what you would do is you just literally get some inspiration from something. So let's say we go back to our desktop and we have a look at something like this. These are the colours that you could steal for steel, no pun intended. And if we open it up here, okay, so we've got a stainless steel kettle here. Right, we can bring this into this, right? And what we can do is select this main case front, and we'll just make that grey for now. Right, so we'll just grey that down, and we'll do the same with, well, we'll leave that for now. So if you now get rid of the highlight that we had before, this one, that can go. And all we're going to do now is work on the main case front, which is this one. I'm just going to copy some of the colours. So to do that, you turn down your flow a little bit and your opacity, and you're going to build this up with a soft brush, like this, and steal some of the colours. So we're going to start off with a dark grey, and just try and copy a little bit how it's done. In fact, actually, we'll start out with a lighter colour. We'll make the majority of the kettle maybe this colour here. Actually, that's not working out, is it? Why is that? Dum dum dum. Main case front. Yeah, that's strange. Photoshop's being funny. And you can just basically just build that up in layers. Once you turn down your brushes a little bit, you can just add that on. Now, steel comes from when you have lots of nice contrasting colours. So if we take something like a dark colour here and chuck that in the middle, here and down the side, and then on here as well, like this, and then we can go back and choose a lighter colour and build a lighter colour back into it. Dark in there, put something really dark in there to add some contrast, and then something really white in here to kind of balance it out. Turn these down a bit more. And it's just a matter of working away at it, really. You just have to spend a bit of time playing around with this till you find something that works well. I don't want to go on about it for too long today because this video's gone on for too long anyway. But yeah, what I'm saying to you is basically take inspiration from other things. Look at how other finishes look on other products and try and build that in to your own sketches and your own work by sort of stealing that inspiration a little bit, and you know, try and just build that into your work as you work like this. It's quite nice. So yeah, I mean, that's rough and it's really quick, but you can see where it's going, and the more time you spend on it, the better it will get. So there's two different examples of different types of finish that you can have, and if you're doing your boards, what you probably will do, if you finish working on this, you can flatten this whole layer down. So let's say you finish working on it, and you can touch that top layer, and you can go to the base front here, and I can go to layer, merge layers, like that, and that's basically just merged them all into one layer, which means I can now shrink that down and do whatever I want and move that around like this if I wanted to. So I could put that on as my sketch, and then I could go back to, say, something like let's choose this one here. Now let's say I'd got loads of sketches development work from my design process. I could then go and get a few of these. Right, so I could go and get a few of these like this, for example, and I could just drag them out, bring them in. Obviously they're not very good resolution on these ones. So I could have a few of my development sketches here. Right, for example, that's not very good. You know, and obviously you want to have some annotations on some of these sketches, and you might want to tell a bit of a story with this page, and sort of so it moves around a little bit. Let's have a look. And you might want to put a little bit of a trim at the bottom. Let's have a look what else we got. Other sketches we can steal. These are quite nice. Right, so you might take one or two of these because they have a bit of a narrative. And if you look on the bottom of this page here, you see how it's a nice little line along the bottom. You could do something like that on yours too. So you might have something like this, just to sort of show off your design process a little bit, like your thought process. And then you might choose to just have something along the bottom, which is just complements the work. And go to paint bucket, make it grey, like that. Just to sort of add a bit of a trim to your sketches. You don't want anything that's really overpowering and garish and bold. You want something that's quite nice. And you know, you can just put a little bit of text on there. You know, you can put a bit of text, whatever it is, make it white. You know, kettle design. You know, something like that, whatever it is. Just something nice and neat and tidy. I always tend to think things that are smaller and tighter tend to look better. So if you actually change the point size of this, that's a bit too big. I would probably, if I was having it on this page, have that down to something quite nice and small. Something like that. So it's just a bit more considered. Yeah. And this is alright. It probably needs like a bit of a shadow underneath. You could probably do that quite easily by doing a brush and then dropping down the opacity and the flow and dropping down the hardness. Or you could actually do an elliptical tool and just drop a little bit of shadow underneath by doing something like this. If it's feathered, if you have it quite feathered, modify feather. I'll probably put 10 pixels, see what happens. Put a colour like that. Yeah, just something just soft, you know. But play around with it. That's alright, it's not too bad. You could actually pump that out a little bit more in the background by doing a box or something to make it jump out. But look, you know, it's up to you. Play around with it a little bit. I've rushed through this really quickly, and you know, it's really down to you to kind of work this out. But there's some of the techniques that I would use when I'm doing rendering in Photoshop. The one we had earlier, which was plastic, looked a little bit like. Let's have a look. If we save this, save as. Two. Yeah, so this is the one we had before. You know, this is the one that we had, which was plastic before, like a plastic finish. you could do a couple of different finishes in there, you know, just to sort of show some different sort of approaches. No, something like that. I probably wouldn't set it out like that way actually. It's not a very nice way of doing it. The other way of looking at it is if you wanted to change the colours of this, it's quite easy to do. All you would do is you would pick the colour that you want to change. So if you have a look at this one here, main case front, like that one, what you would do is you go to Image, Adjustments, Hues and Saturations, and in here you'd be able to change the colour of the kettle. So you might want to have a red, put it down here, or green or whatever. And you can change the saturation of these colours a little bit. So you can actually play around with them a little bit. If I was to kind of do the top bit, this lid side, you know, and go to Hues and Saturations, yeah, you could sort of play around with those as well in there. So you can always change the colours of these things. So that's it. That'll do for now. And I'm sorry the video is so long, but it should help you out. You should do alright, okay? Good stuff. See you later. Yeah, that'll do.